Tonight, President-elect Trump's defense secretary nominee in the hot seat.
I'm going to work with President Trump and this committee to, one, restore the warrior ethos.
The confirmation hearing of Pete Hegseth. Plus, new hope builds around freeing the hostages. The details of a potential Gaza ceasefire deal. And the Santa Ana winds picking up again.
He said 70-mile-an-hour winds. It's going to be very difficult to contain that fire.
The latest on the California wildfires. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
Fireworks on Capitol Hill today as confirmation hearings for President-elect Trump's cabinet begins. Good evening, I'm Jenna Browder.
In Washington, I'm John Jessup. Welcome to Faith Nation. Well, a high-profile public job interview at his Senate confirmation hearing. Pete Hegseth, Trump's nominee for defense secretary, grilled for hours about his qualifications and past positions.
And as expected, questions pretty much fell along party lines. Capitol Hill correspondent Michelle London was following the hearing today and is on Capitol Hill tonight. Michelle?
Well, Jenna, during that hearing, Hegseth defended himself, saying that he is the target of anonymous smears. He says his vision, if confirmed today, is to restore the warrior spirit to the Pentagon and rebuild the American military.
In a packed hearing room, committee chair Senator Roger Wicker quickly addressed the elephant in the room.
This nomination is unconventional. The nominee is unconventional, just like that New York developer who rode down the escalator in 2015 to announce his candidacy for president.
During his opening statement, Hegseth agreed, acknowledging skepticism about his lack of Pentagon experience, while adding it's time to give someone with dust on his boots the helm.
Officers enlisted, black and white, young and old, men and women, all Americans, all warriors. This hearing is for you. Thank you for figuratively and literally having my back.
Protesters interrupted his remarks.
Members of the security.
And security quickly escorted them from the room. Hegseth continues, stating why he believes Trump chose him.
The primary charge he gave me was to bring the warrior culture back to the Department of Defense.
Still, not everyone agrees Hegseth is the right fit.
I do not believe that you are qualified to meet the overwhelming demands of this job. We must acknowledge the concerning public reports against you.
Democrat senators like committee co-chair Jack Reed addressed 2017 allegations of sexual assault and prior drug use against Hegseth. Those charges were dropped, and the nominee called the allegations a smear campaign. New Hampshire's Jean Shaheen homed in on Hegseth's stance about women in the military.
What do you have to say to the almost 400,000 women who are serving today about your position on whether they should be capable to rise through the highest ranks of our military?
Senator, I would say I would be honored to have the opportunity to serve alongside you, shoulder to shoulder, men and women, black, white, all backgrounds, with a shared purpose.
Well, I appreciate your 11th hour conversion.
Given party lines, Hegseth's confirmation in the full Senate could be defeated if only 2 Republicans vote against him. Hegseth stated, regardless of the confirmation hearing's outcome, all glory still belongs to God.
All glory, regardless of the outcome, belongs to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. His grace and mercy abounds each day. May his will be done.
And one of the hot-button topics during today's hearing, Hegseth's views on DEI. The defense secretary nominee repeatedly stated that he strongly believes in prioritizing the importance of diversity. But Democrat senators pushed back, saying it's only when beneficiaries are people like himself. John, Jenna.
All right, Michelle on Capitol Hill, thank you so much. Well, in other news tonight, special counsel Jack Smith is defending his decision to charge Trump over his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. In a report made public today, Smith said Trump, quote, inspired his supporters to commit acts of physical violence on January 6th by intentionally spreading a false narrative about election fraud. Smith added that Trump would have been convicted had he not won the 2024 election. Trump slammed the report as containing fake findings. All right, with us now is Nathan Gonzalez, editor and publisher of Inside Elections and a Faith Nation contributor. So, Nathan, I do want to ask you about Jack Smith's report, but first let's start with the Hegseth hearing on Capitol Hill. What struck you about the hearing today, and do you think Pete Hegseth did what he needed to do to win over Senate confirmation?
I expect Hegseth to be confirmed. There were only Republicans have a little bit of wiggle room with a couple of senators. I think there's still Senator Susan Collins of Maine is someone to watch when it comes to a full vote because she is up for re-election in a state that Trump lost in 2024. Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska hasn't really been a Trump fan for her time. But someone like Joni Ernst, who we heard today on the committee hearing, there was nothing about her interactions with Hegseth which would lead us to believe that she's going to vote against him. And she was maybe an early skeptic. So I think that what we saw was, folks on partisan lines, and I expect him to be confirmed.
We heard in that last soundbite from Hegseth in London's package him affirm his faith in Jesus Christ. But Democrats spent a lot of time on Hegseth's past comments critical of the Pentagon's diversity efforts and women serving in combat. Senator Tim Kaine tried to expose character issues, pointing to a police report of a 2017 affair Hegseth described as consensual. How did he do responding to those types of questions?
I think the Trump supporters and supporters of Hegseth, think that he did great, right? He answered all the critics and he stood up to the Democrats, and Democrats are still worried or appalled by the allegations. And I think what Trump has done, just in general and specifically with some of these nominations, is that he has normalized alleged wrongdoing. I'm not convinced that Hegseth is the only person qualified for this job, but Trump has put us in this position, and he's forcing now Republicans to defend someone who has some very serious allegations against him. But Trump has normalized all this, and it's not. There are millions of people who go through life not being accused of sexual assault or alcohol abuse or financial misconduct, but that seems to be a theme with some of Trump's recommendations for his cabinet.
Nathan, let's talk about Special Counsel Jack Smith, the 174-page report. What new revelations did we learn about, and how significant is it now with his resignation and all of these other federal cases dropped?
Well, I admit I have not read all 100 plus pages yet, but I think it's important for this information to be out there because I do again let people decide for themselves. And this was not. I know that Trump will say that he's innocent and this proves his innocence, or the lack of a trial proves his innocence, but there was no trial. And I think what has happened in this case is a realization that he cannot be prosecuted as president of the United States. And I think one of the reasons why Trump ran again, it wasn't just to become president again and have that political power, but it's a legal shield. And now, because he's becoming president, a lot of these legal issues that he has faced are going away. So let's put this report out there. I think the classified documents report should be out there because he's not going to be going to trial for that either.
All right, Nathan Gonzalez, we're going to have to leave it right there. Nathan Gonzalez with Inside Elections. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, turning overseas, a ceasefire in Gaza could be just hours or days away.
According to the Associated Press, Hamas has accepted a draft agreement to end the fighting and to release dozens of Israeli hostages kidnapped by Hamas on October 7th, 2023. Here's what we know so far about this emerging deal. The agreement comes in 3 phases. The first would last 42 days and see the release of 33 hostages, including men, women, children, and the elderly. However, it's unclear how many of those hostages are still alive. In exchange, Israel would free hundreds of Palestinian prisoners, including some convicted of killing Israelis. The IDF would also pull back from population centers, but remain along the Gaza-Egypt border known as the Philadelphia Corridor. That will allow displaced Palestinians to return to what's left of their homes and also allow for critical humanitarian aid. If everything goes according to plan, the second and third phases would see the release of all remaining hostages in return for Israel's complete withdrawal from Gaza. Mediators, including the United States, Egypt, and Qatar, have worked for more than a year to end the war, While they've shown major progress, officials warn the situation is fragile and talks could still fail.
Richard Goldberg joins us now. He is a senior advisor at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Richard, welcome. So how fragile is this negotiation, and could we see it, in fact, fall apart just like others before it?
Yeah, I think there's no deal until there's a deal, until you actually see hostages coming out of Gaza and see them in their families' arms. Nothing has happened yet, and we know this is a brutal terrorist organization that has played all kinds of psychological games. But we have seen a lot of momentum and concrete steps that we had not seen over the last year, just in the last few weeks and days, especially with lists being prepared, being handed over to the Israelis, specific names of who would come out in certain tranches. And it does sound like, from some of the intelligence sources we're hearing, that in fact there are preparations being made on the Hamas side to gather the hostages together and prepare them for what could be a very quick deal implementation, at least for that first phase. And we know that this will take several weeks, and you won't have all the hostages at once. And every single day, those families will wait with bated breath. Will my family member be coming home today? Will the deal collapse? Will we see tomorrow? And unfortunately, I think a lot of families will also start learning the fate of their loved ones as this unfolds, if they are still living or dead.
Rich, you just mentioned lists and names, and we just gave the framework or the outline of what that deal might look like. What sticks out to you about the emerging details of this potential agreement? Do you see any red flags?
Well, obviously, there's going to be costs and benefits to any deal like this. This is how Hamas engineered it from the beginning, with the psychological torture on the Israelis, who desperately want to get their hostages back. And so paying a price of 50 terrorists, including those who are murderers, for every female IDF soldier being released, well, we've heard that statistic now out in the press. I mean, that is staggering. You're talking about hundreds, perhaps thousands by the end, of terrorists being released. The worst of the worst, we understand, being deported to other countries like Turkey or Qatar. Still very bad. And then, of course, what happens after you get all the hostages back? Hamas would still be in Gaza, still potentially posing a threat to Israel. What will happen to actually remove that threat on a permanent basis if this is actually comes to the end point, the last phase, and all hostages are returned? So there are certainly some big costs here that Israel's going to be paying, some big challenges that are unanswered right now in the end. But if you're a family member, if you're the nation that has been really mourning since October 7th, for those who have been to Israel, just everywhere you look is about the hostages, their photos. This is the moment where the nation will at least breathe a momentary sigh of relief to get their people home, and then think about all the other questions that remain unanswered after that.
So today's Secretary of State Antony Blinken talked about Gaza after the war, Richard. He says the Palestinian Authority should be allowed to have a foothold in the territory and invite international partners to help oversee the Strip. Do you think this is the right approach, and is it enough to stop Hamas resurgence?
I think the priority has to be to de-radicalize Gaza, and that has to mean that the Qataris or the Turks that have sponsored Hamas can have no involvement in financing its reconstruction or the aid efforts. Organizations we've seen tied at the hip and radicalizing Palestinians and working with Hamas, like UNRWA, should no longer exist there, certainly. And the Palestinian Authority that literally pays people to commit terrorist attacks. And remember, the school textbooks in Gaza are Palestinian Authority textbooks teaching kids to hate Jews in Israel. None of that can have a real involvement for there to be a successful day after.
Yeah.
Richard Goldberg with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thank you so much for your time and your insights tonight, Richard.
You bet.
Up next, flames still roar across Southern California. CBN News is on the ground covering the effort to contain the deadly wildfires. When Faith Nation returns. Welcome back. Red flag warnings are in effect tonight for western Los Angeles County and most of Ventura County, where firefighters are racing to contain massive infernos that have swept across the region.
Forecast high winds are threatening to undermine progress in this disaster that's already destroyed thousands of homes and killed at least 24 people. CBN senior Washington correspondent Tara Merchant is here with the latest. Tara, the devastation is just hard to imagine, but it continues. Looks like we're having issues with Tara's audio. I think we have her report, though. Let's go ahead and see her report.
After more than a week, there is no break for those trying to control the multiple outbreaks.
The big concern right now for LA firefighters are the winds. They're expected to pick back up again and last through Wednesday.
Scores of water tankers and additional fire crews are focusing on high-risk areas, with millions under red flag danger warnings.
If you don't have a wildfire evacuation plan for your family and your home, please make one today.
The Eaton fire has burned 14,000 acres and is just 33% contained. The Palisades fire, which has destroyed entire communities, is only 14% contained. More than 12,000 homes are damaged or destroyed.
The wind is blowing this fire right along the riverbed.
This camera in San Bernardino County shows the wind intensity.
And everybody here urges you to remain alert, as danger has not yet passed.
As planes drop chemicals over the fire zone, ground crews work to cut off flames. Dozens of water trucks are in service after hydrants ran dry last week. With winds expected to strengthen again, there's risk to more communities in western LA.
We have an approximately 10-acre brush fire across Canyon underneath high-tension power lines.
The cause of the wildfires remains unknown, with the Los Angeles Fire Department's arson team investigating. Edison, Southern California, faces 4 lawsuits, though it denies any responsibility. Company officials are aware of images showing a fire at the base of an electrical transmission.
And as the fire rages on, Governor Gavin Newsom is asking for another $2.5 billion in aid. Meanwhile, a recall attempt to remove him from office is underway for what critics call a series of catastrophic failures that led to these fires. John and Jenna.
All right, Tara Merchant reporting. Thank you, Tara. Coming up, millions of Americans living with Alzheimer's. Could one single gene unlock new answers about the disease? Next.
Welcome back. A wake-up call from health experts. Dementia cases in the U.S. are set to skyrocket. A new study estimates that more than 2 in every 5 people will develop dementia annually, doubling to 1 million annual cases by 2060. And among Black Americans, new cases could triple. The main reason: people are living longer, and the risk of dementia climbs sharply after the age of 75. But there are things you can do to combat this trend. Researchers suggest improving your heart health with medication and lifestyle changes, diet and exercise, preventing strokes, and even wearing hearing aids, which can help people stay socially and mentally engaged.
Well, right now, nearly 7 million Americans live with Alzheimer's, and for some, genetics play a significant role.
New research shows a combination of genes poses a greater threat than previously believed. CBN medical reporter Lori Johnson has the details.
An estimated 2% of the world's population inherits not 1, but 2 so-called APOE4 genes, one from each parent. Until now, scientists considered this a red flag for developing Alzheimer's, but now see it as more of a certainty.
So that indicates that it is not just a risk factor, but that it's a strong predictor that these individuals would develop Alzheimer's pathology.
The research published in Nature Medicine reports these recipients make up about 1 in 6 Alzheimer's cases.
If you have a strong family history, where a number of relatives have died with early onset Alzheimer's disease, go talk to your doctor.
Unfortunately, Alzheimer's patients inheriting the 2 genes are often denied leading Alzheimer's drug Leqembi because they're reportedly more vulnerable to the medicine's side effects of potential brain bleeding and swelling. The good news, smarter choices have helped certain patients. Some folks who inherited 2 APOE4 genes and began experiencing symptoms say they reversed course thanks to epigenetics, behaviors designed to suppress problematic genes.
As you can imagine, I was terrified.
10 years ago, Julie Gregory couldn't remember the way home or recognize familiar faces.
I even contemplated ending my own life. And I think prayer brought me to the point where I realized what I was learning from mainstream medicine just wasn't true.
She says her symptoms reversed after a program of eating a ketogenic diet, intermittent fasting, eliminating exposure to toxins like mold, and more, developed by Dr. Dale Bredesen. Julie's story is one of 7 featured in his book, The First Survivors of Alzheimer's.
They gave their specific protocols because they are personalized. Here's what each person did, how they did it, what their workarounds were, etc.
Dr. Bredesen says in addition to a genetic component, his program tests patients for about 40 other Alzheimer's risk factors and addresses each area of concern.
And often there are 10 or more, and then we target those with a precision medicine sort of approach.
It's just plain old common sense, and my experience shows me that it works.
Sally Weinrich also considered suicide 5 years ago when she experienced Alzheimer's symptoms.
I had 2 relatives die from it, really 3 relatives die from it, on both sides of my family.
The book also features her turnaround.
The best thing about my Alzheimer's today is I have answers for it, and I have reversed it. It's wonderful. I love life. I enjoy life.
Over 2,000 people adopted the Bredesen protocol. A clinical trial shows over 80% experience cognitive improvement. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Finally tonight, last year, Hurricane Helene carved a path of destruction through the southeast, ruining holiday celebrations for so many families.
And one community decided to hold a Christmas do-over for those impacted by the storm. Mark Kloss, and yes, that's his real name, is the owner of a Christmas entertainment attraction called Castle Noel in Medina, Ohio. He wanted to give families a chance to celebrate, raising $250,000 in donations.
I want the candlelight walk. I want the Christmas parade with the band, and I want to see the fireworks again. I want to bring people for this weekend that is exactly the way we would do it.
An added bonus there, the winter snow covering the ground in Medina, giving families a little bit of a white Chris for their Christmas do-over.
That's really nice to see.
Yeah, just
a selfless thing to do.
Compassionate people all around.
Yeah.
Well, that does it for tonight's Faith Nation.
Have a great night.